Welcome to Deerhound Productions. I'm DaneCat33, and today I'll be taking yet another look at all the evidence implying that Glitchtrap and Burntrap are secretly the Mimic. Since the time we last made a video about this theory, there have been a couple new entries in the world of FNAF, most notably Secret of the Mimic, which has given us plenty of more evidence to connect these two. But before we get to that, let's start with Help Wanted 2, the game that makes it abundantly clear that Glitchtrap is the Mimic. In this second virtual adventure, we play as a protagonist trapped in the AR network. The Helpy assistant gives us the Fast Force action figures, and after collecting them all, they're combined. This summons Glitchtrap, and he has the staff bots tear us apart. When we reawaken, we've been turned into Maskbot, and we deliver the AR mask to Cassie. She's the protagonist in Ruin, and we see the scene play out through her perspective in that DLC. What's interesting about this is that Cassie obtaining the AR mask plays right into the Mimic's plan to escape the sinkhole. He tricks her into using it to deactivate the mech's security that's keeping him contained. So the fact that Glitchtrap starts the Mimic's escape hints that these two might be the same, but it goes even further. As I mentioned, Helpy gives us the Fast Force action figures, which, similar to the tapes in the original Help Wanted, seem to have been used as a Trojan horse to reassemble Glitchtrap. That could mean that Helpy is actually Glitchtrap, either puppeteering the assistant or being used as a disguise. The Princess Quest 4 ending outright confirms this. When Glitchtrap is destroyed in that arcade, Helpy disappears from the game's lobby, implying that he was indeed Glitchtrap. So the rabbit's also a bear. What's my point here? Well, going back to Ruin, we also see that the Mimic is controlling Helpy. Occasionally, his eyes turn orange, just like the evil endoskeletons. And throughout the DLC, he helps you release the Mimic. So not only does Glitchtrap set up the endoskeleton's whole scheme, but he wears the same disguise too. Both characters are also associated with the White Tiger. In Help Wanted 2's Secret of the Mimic teaser, when typing 1979 into the private room keypad, Glitchtrap gives you the White Tiger doll. This item belonged to David Murray, the child who M2, aka the Mimic, was created a copy. Glitchtrap having an item so important to the Mimic's past is already a clear indicator that they might be connected. But we could go even further with this. The items that Glitchtrap gives you are called memories, and they appear to be the memories of William Afton's victims. So this tiger doll is likely supposed to represent the memory of David Murray. It's implied in Moon.exe that M2 created artificial memories of David using his items, which explains how he replicates the deceased child. So the fact that both M2 and Glitchtrap have the memory of David Murray does seem to imply that they're the same. It's also worth noting the similarities between the White Tiger doll and Vanny. Their eyes both light up and resemble each other. Their paws are also similarly colored and stitched, and obviously they're both white animals. Now this might seem random at first, but if you recall in Help Wanted's Curse of Dreadbear DLC, Vanessa told Glitchtrap that she thinks he'd like Vanny. At first, most people assume this was because Vanny is a rabbit like him. But with all these similarities, it might actually be because Vanessa based Vanny on the White Tiger doll that was such a big part of the Mimic's past. Speaking of which, let's dive into that backstory and take a look at Secret of the Mimic. This origin story has less evidence for the endoskeleton's connection to Glitchtrap, but what it does feature is pretty noteworthy. In the game's clock out ending, you deliver the data diver to F10 and 4, and as the name suggests, you clock out of your job. However, as you're driving off, the Mimic attacks you and stuffs you inside the prototype Fredbear and MCM's mock-up of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. This ending is almost a one-for-one recreation of Pizza Party from Help Wanted, where Glitchtrap stuffed Vanessa into Freddy. Both of these endings involve the protagonist being crammed into an animatronic bear and placed on the main stage of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. Similar to the Help Trap ending, I think this very obviously confirms that the Mimic is Glitchtrap. We see him pulling the same bad ending that the rabbit anomaly would later do in Help Wanted. On top of that, the Mimic is faintly illuminated with purple lighting, a color associated with William Afton and by extension, Glitchtrap. There's another connection to him in the theater. As you play through Foxy's show, you're accosted by puppets, which bears striking resemblance to Glitchtrap's puppet from Help Wanted 2 named Tilt. During the Bonkabon hard mode level, Glitchtrap watches you from the machine, observing your actions similar to the Mimic's behavior. After seeing you hit the animatronic puppets and plush babies, he creates Tilt to trick you into hitting him and breaking the arcade. Now, not only does Tilt resemble the MCM puppets, but he also makes similar sounds. While we're talking about Help Wanted 2, let's dive into the original game where Glitchtrap was first introduced to the world. The little baby has come so far. Anyways, I think it's important to note that Glitchtrap has always had a costumed appearance. This is very peculiar. As any FNAF fan knows, William Afton is obsessed with a Spring Bonnie suit, so the fact that Glitchtrap is a costume rather than a spring lock is strange. Even more interesting is that originally, Glitchtrap was going to use the classic Spring Bonnie suit, but for whatever reason, that was changed. Then a couple of years later, we were introduced to the Mimic, a character who primarily wears costumes rather than spring locks like Afton. Considering that sometime in development, Glitchtrap was changed from a spring lock to a costume, it definitely seems like a hint that right from the start, something wasn't quite right with him. And that he's not William Afton, but rather the Mimic, a character who is similarly associated with mascot costumes. Another detail to note is that in the game's lobby, you can hear Glitchtrap making some strange sounds, but it just turns out that he's mimicking Tape Girl.
Hello? Can you hear me?
I don't really think I need to say it, but Glitchtrap mimicking voices is a key sign that he's probably the Mimic. However, some people argued that this was simply because he's attached to the tapes. And I would agree if it wasn't for Help Wanted 2. Going back to Bonkabon, as the level progresses, you can hear the same strange sounds, presumably coming from Glitchtrap. This debunks the idea that he was only mimicking Tape Girl due to being connected to her recordings, as at this point, he's escaped from the game and presently resides in the Pizzaplex's AR network. From the very beginning of Glitchtrap's existence, we have him copying voices and appearing as a mascot costume, indicating that he's the M2 program manifesting digitally. The AR spin-off game Special Delivery also implies that Glitchtrap is an AI program rather than a human soul. While this game was still online, players could read messages detailing internet searches from Vanessa that set off some red flags. These seem to have been researched while Glitchtrap was influencing her, as one asks, how to induce compliance in human subjects. Obviously, Glitchtrap was trying to learn how to make Vanessa less of a reluctant follower. But what's interesting here is how he specifies human, almost as if Glitchtrap isn't human himself. This behavior also further distances him from Afton. Throughout the games, books, and movies, William Afton is shown to be a master manipulator. So the fact that Glitchtrap is researching how to make people compliant makes him seem inexperienced, unlike Afton. So yet again, this rabbit anomaly doesn't seem to be Afton's digital ghost. The tales from the Pizzaplex books also draw more connections between Glitchtrap and the Mimic. Granted, while it seems like Secret of the Mimic made it clear that these books aren't in the game's canon, FNAF's characters usually remain very consistent between continuities, and similar events occur, so I think it's still fair to use these for evidence even if they're not in the same universe. The first detail is very minor, but I think it's worth discussing. As Edwin beats the Mimic in the books, spittle shoots out of his mouth, and after he sees what he's done to his creation, tears run down his face. Both of these details can be seen on Glitchtrap's model. Faint tears run down his face, and spittle drips from his mouth. These features are exaggerated on Glitchtrap's Princess Quest appearance, clearly showing that they're intentional. This might have been added to connect Glitchtrap to the Mimic, showing him copying the tragic event that set off M2's violent behavior. A more obvious connection between the anomaly and the Mimic presents itself in the story Tiger Rock. This one focuses on the Mimic manifesting in a Pizzaplex VR booth as Tiger Rock, a glam rock version of the White Tiger. It's interesting how similar to Glitchtrap, the Mimic appears in VR and starts stalking the person using it. Both of these characters being virtual antagonists definitely implies that they might be the same. They even have a fascination with hide and seek. Tiger Rock says he learned how to play it a long time ago, and in Help Wanted's Pizza Party level, we play a game of hide and seek that leads us to Glitchtrap. The storyteller also implies that M2 was used to program the Freddy Fazbear virtual experience from Help Wanted. In this story, Fazbear Entertainment fires the Pizzaplex's writing team and replaces them with the storyteller, which utilizes the Mimic 1 program to write the Pizzaplex's story. It's also important to note that in the books, there was never an M2, so Mimic 1 is the same program copying Edwin's rage and running in the homicidal endoskeleton. Anyways, the story's plot is very similar to how the vintage circuit boards were used to program the Freddy Fazbear virtual experience. Those were a corner-cutting method to speed up the game's development, just like how the Mimic replaced the Pizzaplex's writers. In the books, there were even Mimic endoskeletons made by Fazbear Entertainment, who, instead of having every performance programmed into their systems, simply observed other routines and mimicked them. We have a major focus on the Mimic being used as a corner-cutting method, similar to those vintage circuit boards. But what's even more interesting is what Hand Unit says about them.
Using proprietary technology developed by Fazbear Entertainment, our VR development teams were able to use vintage control boards almost like plug and play, digitally recreating performances and personalities from the past in an instant.
Now obviously, recreating personalities is what the Mimic does, possibly implying that the circuit boards had the M2 program. But what's even more interesting is that the Mimic did encounter prototypes of the Freddy's animatronics, making him a good source to recreate them in VR. This might even explain the similar endings in both games. A detail in Secret of the Mimic also implies that M2 was used to program the virtual experience. In MCM's Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, there's a Showtime button, something we never see in any other pizzeria in the games. The Freddy Fazbear virtual experience lobby also features a Showtime button, which, similar to the one in MCM, does nothing. This might imply that the virtual lobby was created from M2's memories of the MCM Freddy's. If the circuit boards used to create the virtual experience did somehow contain the M2 program, this would explain how the Mimic ended up in the game as Glitchtrap. It's also worth noting how in the Storyteller, we learn that the Mimic's program can appear in VR, AR, and arcades. And these are the exact platforms that Glitchtrap appears in. During Help Wanted, we see him in the Freddy Fazbear virtual experience, then the Princess Quest arcades in Security Breach, and in Help Wanted 2, he appears in the AR Network. While we're discussing the Pizzaplex, the Storyteller also implies that the Mimic is the one behind the animatronic's hostile behavior during the games. When the Mimic's AI ends up in the Pizzaplex animatronics, it makes them act very strangely. Most notably is that it gives Roxy and Monty their personalities that we see in the games. Monty becomes much more aggressive and destructive, while Roxy turns into a bully. So we have a story where the Mimic infects the whole Pizzaplex and makes the animatronics act hostile, similar to how Glitchtrap corrupted the animatronics in the games. This is a pretty clear parallel, and the Mimic giving Monty and Roxy the personality from the games likely implies that the Mimic is also responsible for this in the game universe. And considering that we know Glitchtrap infected the bots, that would make him the Mimic. Before moving on to Burntrap, I do want to address Glitchtrap's role in Dead by Daylight, since I know some people are dying to use that as a gotcha moment. In the game's Five Nights at Freddy's chapter, Springtrap has a Glitchtrap skin, and when this was first released, a lot of people said this proved that Afton is Glitchtrap. However, this is a legendary skin. And if you don't know what that means, essentially legendary skins are entirely new characters. For example, Jill Valentine has a legendary skin for Claire Redfield, Chucky has one for Tiffany Valentine, the Legion has one for Hunk, etc. So Glitchtrap being a legendary skin for Springtrap doesn't really mean anything, as legendary skins are separate characters. Moving on from Glitchtrap, let's discuss his real-world body, Burntrap. This crispy rabbit appears during one of Security Breach's non-canon endings. He resides beneath the Cheery Pizzaplex in the abandoned pizza place, which was the main location in Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria Simulator, and where the Mimic eventually ends up imprisoned. Burntrap appears to be an even more decayed version of Springtrap, but much like Glitchtrap, it seems like this is actually the Mimic. During Burntrap's opening and ending cutscene, you can see him curling his arm to his chest, very similar to how the endoskeleton does in Secret of the Mimic. Speaking of cutscenes, in Ruin's secret ending, Cassie uses the scooper to remove the Mimic from its Gregory costume. What's interesting is how similar this is to the Burntrap ending. The two both have very clear visual parallels, with something swooping in and dragging the Mimic away. On top of the visuals, the Mimic's Ruin model also has some details tying him back to Burntrap. The animatronic's left hand is a slightly modified version of Burntrap's hand model. And you might be saying, well, the Mimic's right hand is an entirely different model. And while that is true, Ruin actually explains why this is. While exploring Burntrap's abandoned lair, you can see this charging pod from Security Breach is empty, and there's a handprint in the vent. If you pay very close attention, you'll notice that the print matches up with Burntrap's right hand. You can even see where his bone fingers were, indicated by the dull scratch marks compared to the fingers with sharp claws. This implies that Burntrap woke up and started roaming around the pizza place basement. His handprint also appears in another location, the broken vent leading into the Mimic's lair. Judging from this, and some other details, we can piece together a pretty clear picture of what happened after the events of Security Breach. Following the Princess Quest 3 ending, Gregory traveled into the sinkhole to trap Burntrap. I mean, trap isn't his name, he's kind of asking for it. We know Gregory went down there, as you can find a Glamrock Freddy backpack with his name on it outside of the Mimic's lair. We can also reasonably assume that he brought the Glamrock Freddy walkie-talkie that we see the Mimic use in Ruin. He likely used this to lure Burntrap / the Mimic into his lair. The animatronic tried to escape through the vent, but it collapsed. And judging from Burntrap's handprint, his right hand broke off in the vent. This is even referenced in Secret of the Mimic. During the end of Jackie's encounter, the Mimic grabs the side of the vent with his right hand, just like how the Burntrap print is positioned. And in this cutscene, the Mimic also causes the vent to collapse. On the Mimic's Ruin model, we can also see that his right arm is damaged and his hand doesn't match up with the left one, implying that his right hand broke off in the vent and he replaced it with a new one. So not only do the handprints explain the differing hand models, but they further imply that Burntrap is the Mimic and shed some light on how he got trapped. Another detail to note is when Cassie encounters the endoskeleton, you can faintly see purple lighting behind him, possibly as a callback to Burntrap's reveal, where he was practically bathing in purple. Moving on to Secret of the Mimic, in one of the endings, you travel into MCM's Research and Development, which we previously discussed. But unlike in the Clock Out ending, other endings actually allow you to explore this location. When you activate the stage lights, the Mimic climbs out of a pile of parts, wearing an amalgamation of prototype Freddy's characters. What's most intriguing here is that he wears a Bonnie head with rabbit ears, possibly referencing Burntrap. In fact, these endings are very similar. Both have you traveling beneath the game's main location and facing a rabbit animatronic within Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. This seems to be a clear reference to the Burntrap ending, further tying him back to the Mimic. One of the biggest pieces of evidence for the shapeshifter being Burntrap actually appears in the Tales books, which again, while probably not being canon, still likely holds some significance for the story in the games. In those books' epilogues, the Mimic is delivered to the pizza place, strangely appearing burnt and with rabbit ears attached to his head. This seems to be a pretty clear hint at the identity of the burnt rabbit animatronic in the pizza place. We also see a nod to this form in the Pizzaplex's endoskeleton nursery. There's a mural of a Glamrock endoskeleton with rabbit ears drawn on, and Glitchtrap is depicted next to it. The company Hex even made a double-sided keychain, seemingly featuring the epilogue Mimic design, and the other side shows Glitchtrap. Now, I don't think we should use the merchandise for lore, but I will say that Scott is usually very controlling of merch when it comes to lore implications. So it's interesting they approved a double-sided keychain of Glitchtrap and the Mimic with rabbit ears and purple eyes. Adding on to this, Burntrap was also included in Funko's Mimic Popwave. Now that we know Glitchtrap/Burntrap is the Mimic, I want to explore how this Afton persona came to be. In Secret of the Mimic's Moon.exe game, we see how the Mimic learned about David and the Murrays through their items, seemingly developing memories based on the objects relating to them. Then in Help Wanted 2, we see that Glitchtrap has the memories of Gabriel, Jeremy, Susie, Fritz, Cassidy, and Charlie, who were Afton's 6 main Freddy's victims. As we previously stated, we also know that Glitchtrap is a White Tiger memory doll. So it seems that, similar to M2's memory of David, these memories were artificially created. This leaves the question of when and where he developed these memories. We don't know what happens to the endoskeleton between Secret of the Mimic and Security Breach. The animatronic might have witnessed Afton's murders at Freddy's, but I think it's more likely that he learned about these events from the Freddy Fazbear virtual experience. The game revolves around the tragedies surrounding Fazbear Entertainment, and even features a recreation of Afton's murders. Since M2 was likely used to program the experience, it's possible he learned about Afton from this game, developing digital memories of his victims, which transformed the program into Glitchtrap. A copy of William Afton, similar to how M2 was originally a replica of David. The Mimic was locked in on this persona, explaining the vastly different behavior. We even see in Secret of the Mimic's storytime ending that the endoskeleton can become fully invested in its personalities to the point where it acts entirely different from its usual behavior. Unlike most of the Mimic's personas, he remained locked in as Glitchtrap for a very long time, throughout the events of Help Wanted, Special Delivery, Security Breach, and Help Wanted 2, where we witnessed the end of Glitchtrap. During the events of that game, the protagonist collects all of M2's Afton memories and plays Princess Quest 4. I'm not sure exactly when or how this happens, considering the protagonist dies in the normal ending, but Glitchtrap also dies in the Princess Quest ending, and we see him in the normal ending. The order of this is all very confusing. I said all of this in my FNAF timeline video and claimed that the Princess Quest ending was non-canon. But since then, the more I think about it, the Princess Quest 4 ending is the only explanation we have for why we don't see any traces of Glitchtrap and Ruin, so I assume it's canon. I'm still not sure when it happens, but Help Wanted 2 is kind of an illogical game, so I don't really think that matters all that much. Anyways, after collecting all of the Afton memories, the protagonist plays Princess Quest 4, where they help the Moon and Vanny destroy Glitchtrap. The Moon's inclusion here is interesting, considering Secret of the Mimic uses the Moon as a representation of Edwin and the Mimic. So maybe M2 wants to destroy the Glitchtrap persona, or maybe it's Vanny's revenge against him. Not quite sure. Regardless, she crushes Glitchtrap. The achievement for this ending says, System threats found, repair complete. It seems like the threats referred to here are the Afton memories, and the system is M2. Vanny destroyed the Glitchtrap persona and all traces of Afton's memories from M2. In the real world, this causes the Mimic to remove his Burntrap appearance, and the lights in his layers shift from purple to orange, signifying Glitchtrap's destruction and the return of the Mimic's default behavior. This explains why we don't see any traces of Burntrap when we encounter the Mimic in Ruin. That persona is gone. This is also reinforced by Mystic Hippo. During Help Wanted 2's Secret of the Mimic update, she says,
A hidden performer is ready to take a bow.
We know this is referring to the Mimic since she calls him a performer when you spawn him on stage. The Mimic taking a bow after Help Wanted 2's ending matches up with how he stops being Burntrap and Glitchtrap. Before Secret of the Mimic, I was somewhat critical of Glitchtrap being the Mimic, since I wanted a more outright reveal of the Rabbit Anomaly's true identity. But since then, I've come around to it, mostly because Help Wanted 2 and Secret of the Mimic have made it obvious that Glitchtrap is M2. And I think those games do a good job explaining how and why the Mimic adopted his Afton persona. While I believe that Scott and Steelwoolf's communication issues with a security breach messed up this plot twist, I still think it's a cool addition to the story, and makes the Mimic feel less like a random addition to the ongoing Pizzaplex story. It also allows me to say that the Mimic isn't Dead by Daylight, which is pretty cool, but I'm still hoping he'll be added as a killer in the future. If you enjoyed this video, please consider liking, subscribing, and joining our monthly membership. It helps support us, and you'll receive a range of cool perks, including shoutouts in our videos, custom emojis, badges and extra name, exclusive previews of upcoming projects, and more. Special thanks to our current member, Shaun, and thanks to you for watching. Be sure to check out some of our other videos.